Welcome to this meeting. It's a Rules Committee meeting on AO 2017-36. Let's go around the table and identify ourselves for the record. Mr. Halls, we'll start with you.
Bill Balsey, the municipal attorney.
Mike Abbott, city manager.
Patrick Flynn.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Amy?
I'm here.
Okay.
Elvie Jackson.
Victory.
Felix Rivera.
Tim Stew. Bill Evans. John Wendleton.
Pete Peterson. Julia?
Julia's here and so am I.
Well, thank you for being here. Patrick's your ordinance. Let's go through it, and then I want to reach the departments and see if you guys have any feelings about it. And then we got enough time, we're going to open some public comments. We normally do those today. So Patrick, you want to lead us through this?
Well, Mr. Chairman, you scheduled this, but
You authored it, sir.
yeah, this is a relatively simple ordinance on an extraordinarily complicated topic, which is how to deal with the shall we say, evolution of UAV aircraft. The FAA has certifications associated with UAV operations. The amendment that you have before you makes recognition of that and exempts them from certified operators from the ordinance as proposed. All it would do is say if you're going to operate a UAV, a drone, then you have to maintain a 50-foot vertical separation from private property. It is the only substantive objection that I have heard is that is its classification under the public nuisance law as opposed to a trespass law. The trespass law issue was problematic due to the way the state statutes have changed, and that's why the public nuisance route was taken. Again, if you have the certification under the FAA and you're surveying a utility line, for example, then you are not subject to this. It is essentially an pro-privacy, anti-prurient piece of legislation. Steve Colligan, I'm sure you've seen his emails. He's head one of the UAV organizations in the state of Alaska. He's actually a member of the Matsu Borough Assembly, and Mr. Chairman, I'm sure you know, helped supervise our redistricting plan several years ago. Has sent his comments saying he thinks it's appropriate. Mr. Ben Kelly, another member of the industry, he says with the amendment he is comfortable with it. I think we have a reasonable approach. It is only one step in what I think is going to be a prolonged conversation on this topic. As I said, the only substantive objection I've heard is what piece of the law it falls under. And I will acknowledge that and just say that I did the best I could given the circumstances. I'm sure there are other comments. I'll welcome them.
Let's go to the Sunday departments. Mr. Cross, is it going to affect you guys? Can you and code enforcement deal with this? Follow it all?
I'm not sure exactly how we would enforce it. So the challenge I see is how do you determine what's 50 feet above a fixed object? For trigonometry, you can obviously judge the height of a building or structure. That's one challenge. Another challenge is how do I gather evidence to bring before a hearing officer? Because by the time someone calls about a drone, since they are highly maneuverable, that's the purpose of them. By the time you get there, maybe they're gone, maybe they're not. How do you find the operator? Does the operator maybe across the parking lot, across the street, you can't even see them, they're flying. So there are a lot of challenges. chase that down. So there's some challenges. I think I understand the intent behind it, but as far as enforcing it goes, we'll have to see how that goes. I reached out to several jurisdictions across the country when this first came out. Glendale, Arizona, Augusta, Georgia, someplace up in Minnesota. Most of them, none of them had any distance involved. It was, where are they permitted? Are they permitted to be used in certain areas? Some call it warrant, some call it permit. Are they banned entirely? I think it's Arizona passed a law through the state where they had, or maybe Washington, one of the two, where they had to provide, they have 2 parks in within the city, at least one of them had to allow operation. So they handled it whether it's permitted or not, or can you provide a place for them, but none of them had any distance like this specified, and they thought it would be challenging as well.
Thank you, sir. How about the port? Are you here? Is there? Okay. Thank you.
If I may, Mr.
Go ahead,
Chairman.
ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The utilities are here, not to comment on the ordinance, but to make some comments on drones by itself. Sure. Thank you.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. For the record, Steve Rebuffalo, the court director. And we've been thinking about drones for a couple of years now. The initial impetus behind why we thought it might be a good idea was from a security force enhancement capability. Like with all the petroleum tanks down there and the docks, there's a lot of nooks and crannies that cameras don't see into. So having the capability to fly a drone when somebody's reported something suspicious going on in a certain area just gives a leg up to the security guys to keep an eye on what's going on. It's also a pretty good tool to have for some kind of incident response, incident surveillance. Should that be needed, you can't get too close to a fire, but you can stand off with a drone and monitor what's going on so that we can keep track of things that are happening down there at the port. And it's a good inspection tool. We get a lot of ice around the piling in the wintertime, and we also sometimes need to get under the dock. And we've seen drones go under our dock when professionals have brought them down here to do exactly what we would think would be a good idea, which is to get a close-up inspection on some of the facility that you couldn't otherwise get to certain times of year in a boat. So there's quite a few uses that we would have. Is it every day? No, it's not going to be every day, but it's one of those things where when the circumstances are right, you go, gosh, I wish I had one, because we could have done this, this, and this. So we see a lot of utility in having one available for us. And we know, we've already talked to the base, because Jay Bear, I raised it at one of our partnership meetings, and my phone rang off the hook the next day because everybody on the base wanted to know what we were going to do with the drone down the port. Don't forget to do this, don't forget to call this guy, don't forget to file this form. So we get all of that. And our closest neighbors, Governor Hill, actually we talked to them kind of offline about it, and they didn't see anything wrong with it. And there's nothing neighborhood-wise that we would have to fly close to be able to do anything we would need to do to surveil facilities down on the port.
Just to clarify, there's nothing in this ordinance that affects your operation.
Yes. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, yeah, I guess maybe generally, but how hard is it to get an FAA operator license? Sometimes the court just go online and ask a few questions, they got it.
For a 130, for a 333, it's actually rather involved. For a 135, it's relatively simple.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Steele?
Yeah, Steve, I was thinking also about having a small boat over in terms of the security patrols. Might not have to drive down with the hook if they had it. Then you might find them playing with the drone. But, and you brought up the base. It seemed to me since the flight path is where it is, that would be a concern anytime you're flying.
Well, there's nothing that we would want to surveil down at the port that would require us to fly a drone above the level of the cloth, which keeps it out of the flight path, just about everything. And when you do get to higher elevations, you're outside the approach end of the runway and the accidental zones, so you're operating in a safer place.
It would certainly be an interesting tool.
I'm sorry?
I said it would certainly be an interesting tool, even for
Yes.
some of the customers, perhaps, in terms of if they hit something on the way in, they may want to inspect the side of the hold or something like that of the ships.
Well, the few folks that we have hired to do some drone camera footage for just for utilities.
Okay.
We're gonna go to ML&P next.
Okay.
ML&P here?
I'm Gary Agron, the Division Manager for Engineering at MLP. We've been using the UASs now for last year. Last year we went ahead and we have a FAA certified UAA vendor that we use. We used them last year. They gave us for two projects, and it was a mutual learning experience between the two of us, and it was at no cost. So we were able to learn how to use the UAVs and understand the accuracy of it, as well as they go ahead and understand what our needs are. So for example, Plant 2A, the new plant, we were able to go through approximately 47 acres of land in, let me see what it says, 18 minutes, versus the weeks that would have taken for a traditional survey team to go in there, not only to get horizontal survey, but also vertical survey. So we're able to go ahead, not only get not only the topography and stuff, but also the equipment that's out there, the switch cabinets, and the transformers, anything that's out there. We can now know exactly the location that it's at, the distance that it is. You can measure based upon the imagery that we receive, the actual length, width, and height of the equipment. Total, so we had a lot of accuracy out of that. Hardly any man hours on that, except for our engineers to be able to take that data upon return and then not go ahead and put it onto a piece of paper. Substation 8, which is the substation there in the Unmanned district, close to King Career Center. We're about ready to go ahead and expand that substation to be able to provide more service and greater reliability to the Unmanned district. We need to expand though. We had a UAS go into that area to go ahead and provide us a 3D model for us to go to the real estate department to show them exactly where we're going to, where's the watershed line, where's the tree line at. We can go ahead and get at the same time all the dimensions that we needed to for that substation. Great use of the UAS then. 36th Avenue survey. We have an example here, something we did over at on 36th Avenue between Denali and this old Seward Highway. And traditionally, if you go ahead and get a survey crew to go in there, it would have required about 300 or 250 to 300 man hours just to go ahead and do the survey there. Whereas the UAS went in there through the 90 acres of area within 46 minutes. 46 minutes we were able to go in and do this. We have a project that's going on this summer, which is the Bootlegger Cove area. It's a Title 21 area, 48 acres in order for us to go ahead and underground a lot of the overhead lines that are in that area. To get a survey team in there, we think that's going to take weeks to go ahead and get that. That's getting curved, that's getting to where every pole is. We could do this in a matter of hours just with the UAS and then bring that information back. Our survey team, which is a two-man team, is really used in the summertime to go out and support the installers as they're putting in faults to make sure that's all done. So they hardly get any time to support the engineers. Using the UAS has taken a lot to be able to provide that manpower and give our designers the much needed accuracy. So what we're seeing altogether is it's elimination of waste. It's a lot of wait time that our engineers have because they're waiting for the survey folks. The UAS has helped us that. Greater economy of scale. That area that we did there was just for one project. Come to find out, it was able to satisfy 4 engineering projects. So we don't have to take that engineering team to go out there 4 different times. It takes care of that with that task. Took care of the desire or the needs of 4 engineers. Better use of manpower and obviously the reduced costs. So the UASs, yes, we see a greater value. Next steps besides Bootlegger's Cove, transmissions lines, distribution lines. If there's a major failure, we can go out there with the UAS and find where any of the disruptions are with the UAS in a matter of minutes. So,
Mr. Evans has a question.
Yeah, it's just more of a broader question, so I'm a little confused. I mean, as I understand it, we're not debating the utility of drones. There are many good uses for drones, and we should be encouraging them. Hopefully there'll be more and more drones used for a lot of things like these guys have described. But as I understand Mr. Flynn's ordinance, which I don't support, but as I understand it, he's trying to curb an abuse of the use of drones. He's not saying that drones are bad or drones are good or that there are legitimate uses for drones. And Pat, or you can correct me, but I mean, their uses we're talking about would not even, they'd be exempted from your ordinance anyway.
That's correct. And let me expand on that a little bit, if I might, Mr. Chairman, since I was in the queue. I'll ask the question again. Is there anything in this ordinance with the amendment attached that would curb your utilization of drone technology for your purposes?
I mean, we're at 300 feet, AGL, yours is 50 feet, so we're okay.
Okay. So, no relevance to this topic. However, the next step in this process, whether this ordinance is approved or not, is how the municipality defines its utilization of drone technology. Because right now, MLMP, Port of Anchorage, Solid Waste Services, municipal, real estate services, can utilize drone technology as long as they have an FAA certified operator. And the data they collect can be used for anything. Anything. Not just their contracted purpose. Now, I know I'm supposed to be a liberal, but I also happen to be a libertarian. That bothers me. And it should bother you, Mr. Chairman. And the municipality has no stated policy for how the data collected is utilized.
Well, beyond the ordinance, we do need to come up with an overall policy. We're talking the fire department. There are times when these vehicles are useful for the fire department. There are times when
They're in the way.
civilians come in there with their small ones and they're worried they can't bring a helicopter in or a plane to do that.
So this is, as I said, a very modest step to protect private property rights and privacy. There are many more that need to be made. I don't have the time to do it. You guys get stuck with it. Congratulations. But you need to be thinking through these things because it matters, and it matters for our citizens. And Mr. Frost, I do appreciate your comments. The good news is everybody and their flipping mother has an iPhone that can record and can use scale and can give you the data you need to do enforcement. It's a very difficult thing to enforce. Any public nuisance ordinance is difficult to enforce. How many times have you effectively enforced an animal control issue? Once a year? Maybe? So I recognize it's a challenging issue, but it's just the first step in a long line of conversation. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarity relative to Mr. Evans' comments, okay, the utilities are here, nothing to do with this ordinance whatsoever. And if I had this time, I would have changed the description of the work session. This work session is to discuss Mr. Flynn's ordinance primarily, but I thought I'd seize the opportunity to also invite the utilities here just to talk about the subject of drones. So I'm sorry it caused a little bit of confusion, but they're here to talk about the subject of drones, not Mr. Flynn's ordinance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Evans?
Yeah, I get, and I don't want to get into the arguments. Did we close public hearing on this already?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Bless you. But as I recall, I mean, so I understand what you're going for, Patrick. I mean, the way this was described originally, you had some kind of Isaac Newton moment where you're sitting out in the backyard reading a book and a drone kind of disturbed you. And I understood that to be sort of the impetus of what you were trying to at least prevent, is people being annoyed by, people in the neighborhood or hobbyists kind of flying around, whether they're invading your privacy or not, they're just, causing just concern. And to that extent, it seems like a fine idea to stop that nuisance. It seems like the problem I have is that the 50-foot barrier is an insufficient way of describing that, because a drone can fly over your house at 50 feet and on its way to somewhere else, and it's hardly a nuisance. It's, you may not like it, but it's not that big of a problem. Whereas, hovering over your house for a certain period of time may be a better way of describing what it is you're seeking to protect.
I actually had that conversation with a number of people in the industry, and basically the definition of hover is virtually impossible to create. Is it 2-acre piece of property versus a 6,000-foot lot? Is it moving at 1 mile an hour versus 3 miles an hour versus 0.5 miles an hour? And I had to find the right line. So I will add that federal case law speaks to an 85-foot vertical separation, and I picked 50 to be conservative because of the numerous flight lines that Mr. Steele referred to around the Anchorage area, Merrill Field, J-Bear, Anchorage International, the GA, Anchorage International, Campbell Airstrip. It seemed to me 85 would actually be almost impossible to enforce because you would be forcing UAVs into flight lines where they couldn't operate, and that's why I came down to 50.
So you're a liberal who's a libertarian being conservative.
Exactly. You got it.
Mr. Wilson, and I'll go to Mr. Hughes.
I'm not strays from this a bit, but you said that all the information that they collect, so for public, but if they had spent weeks surveying instead of months with UAVs, they're still having survey data that presumably would also be available to the public. I don't see how there's more data collected and
Well, you can ask them to explain the difference between how a surveying crew operates and how the photographic, videographic collection differs, but I can assure you it's somewhat significantly greater. If you want them to explain, I'll let them answer for you.
Mr. Wilson?
not today.
Anything else, sir?
Thank you.
Mr. Peterson, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Flynn, you just mentioned that the FAA limit is 85 feet, and we're talking about 50 feet?
FAA, well, it's not FAA, it's the federal case law, and this is almost embarrassing to admit that I know this, but part of my research, there was a chicken farm somewhere in, I think, North Carolina, where federal aviation activity under the Air Force was causing problems with the chicken's reproductive processes. And the chicken farmer sued the federal government and won. And the 85-foot standard, I believe, was what the Supreme Court decided on as part of that litigation.
So are we allowed to go lower with our standard?
Yes.
50 feet? We are.
Yes. But if we went beyond 85 feet, we'd probably fight in a fight over federal jurisdiction.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Tucker, ma'am.
Thank you. My understanding from going to the demo courses that you have supported me with and in doing some of the research for Patrick related to this is that even the amateur UAV or UAS operators are required by the FAA to have this certification. Is that your understanding also, Patrick?
They are in theory supposed to, but the vast majority of hobbyists do not.
Okay, so in exempting everybody who has, and with the certification comes the number and the identification on the UAV from the research that I did. So this would really apply to, and the data that would be collected by the cell phone users would be of UAV operators who are out of compliance with FAA
get into the garbage. Do you think drones might be able to be used one way or another to help alleviate that problem?
I can't answer that yet. I do know that we spend, a little bit of money on having folks that are out there all the time, kind of taking care of vectors and birds and stuff like that are out there.
Thank you.
Sam, any more questions? AWWU's here now?
Yes.
You want to talk to us about drones, or you can talk the ordinance. This is the reason for having it is just go with the ordinance, but it's expanded to drones since your last department. Are you guys going to use drones if we have a policy for the use of drones?
I haven't studied the ordinance very much, but I can just talk a little bit about our use of drones. We've got some visual aids that I have to share with you. The top sheet, the small sheet is a segment from a video along Northern Lights, along a construction project where we surveyed the whole alignment of a project with drones. And the subsequent shots are still shots from a project that we did back in 2014. We have a certified drone operator on staff. Most of the work that we would plan to do with drones would be with the contractor, so we wouldn't have to make sure that all the FAA concerns are on the contractor. We would use drones, UAVs for inspections of construction projects, and they're particularly useful for speaking with private property owners that are affected along the course of a linear project like a water or sewer replacement. We can document very precisely from the air what the conditions of the site were prior to the construction. So if there's any disturbance, any temporary construction permits that were on private property along the alignment, we can make sure that the pre-condition and post-condition match up by use of the drones. So we think that they're going to be a very useful tool for us, regardless of how high they are. But most of our work is going to be within the right-of-way. We also use it for pipeline inspections. We have right-of-way from the lake down to the plant. It is traversable by four-wheel drive vehicle. It's not easy. We anticipate flying that on a more regular basis to make sure that we're keeping tabs on the condition of the alignment, at least the surface expression.
Mr. Steele.
Yeah, what about, we might be getting into science fiction here, but we have to periodically test the outfall at the sewage treatment plant in terms of certain distance from the outfall, what is the concentration, and so on and so forth. Is there any way to do that with a drone in terms of taking the measurement out?
I hadn't thought about that. Our annual monitoring program includes following droves from the outfall up and down the inlet with the tides, and we measure water quality in the water column as the drove goes along. My sense right now is that we would probably still do that with the boat.
Gives you more flexibility, or you can stay out there longer and so on and so forth, but it also is more labor intensive in terms of personnel.
I'm sure, as the technology develops, I'm sure there'll be lots of opportunities for doing different things.
And the regulators will start doing that too.
Mr. Joe,
Probably other questions.
just real quickly, presuming, your operator in-house has an FAA cert and your contractor would have an FAA cert, this ordinance would affect you with the amendment. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, since we got the diversion on the department stuff, let's go back to the ordinance in front of us. Anybody from the public would like to make a comment about 3 minutes on the ordinance? Lance, you've been here for a while.
I can just bring something up for just a second, sorry. I had sent you all a reference to a report.
Would you give everybody your name, please?
I'm sorry, Lance Hager. And of course, it's not loaded yet. So really quickly, there's the National League of Cities Commission report. It kind of is generally middle of the road, but pro-city oriented. It specifically had 3 recommendations. One, that this not be dealt with through nuisance ordinances. It talks specifically about 2 approaches. One, dealing with specific behavior, so kind of legislating that was really the nature of my comment. I'm sorry I had not sent it earlier. I just sent everybody earlier today the link to the National League of Cities reports. So it's short. It's 15 pages and half of them are pictures. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to.
We appreciate the work NLC does. Thank you. Anybody else want to talk to somebody about anything relative to this?
I can speak, sir.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Just as a citizen, as an employee, but I feel on this. My name's Forrest Roy, Municipal Light Power, and I'm sure you've looked at this, sir. I don't know, I haven't looked at your ordinance. The optics on these devices now is going to make the 50-foot limit, 300-foot limit arbitrary. The speed at which they're traveling is going to make hovering arbitrary. The one that we have used is called an EV. It's a fixed wing drone. You cannot see it with the naked eye unless you're watching it the entire time. So it's going to be incredibly hard to see this coming. They're putting new sensors on these devices that can do thermal imaging. So from a distance, they can see through walls and windows. It's incredible the rate of this technology is moving. So I just want to inform you guys that this is the beast you're trying to put back in the bottle for this.
Mr. Wilson, so you said beast.
You said you can't see it coming. This one's so fast. How fast do they go?
But they can travel up to 60 miles an hour from these devices. Their size, yeah. The one that we used to do the survey that you have there is maybe the width of one of these desks. But as soon as you look away for a second, that's why they have two operators. So one of the guys is watching the entire time. As soon as you look away, it's very hard to pinpoint that in the sky.
Ms. Graves, Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not to sound sarcastic, but are you referring to this ordinance as a beast?
I guess I was.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Maybe the
Thank you.
technology now.
I don't like
She's in the
beasts.
body shop.
I don't like beasts. I'm afraid of them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
mice.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could quickly wrap up.
Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, so I think those comments are prescient. This is a very challenging technology. It has a lot of utility. It has a lot of potential for abuse. In drafting this ordinance, I tried to be very, very circumscribed in my approach. I don't want to ban drones. I don't want Anchorage to be an anti-drone municipality. Ironically, Mr. Ahern, it was an NLC meeting that motivated me to pursue this, precisely because the federal government doesn't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They're trying to figure it out. They might figure it out. They might not. But if we, as a local governance body, provide some ideas, even if they're imperfect, then maybe that will become part of the solution that helps address the larger issue on a national level. Hence my bringing this forward. Hence my forewarning you, there's more to be done that I will not be here to do. I don't know if it's the right answer. I'm sure it's not perfect. But I would appreciate your consideration.
Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to confirm, Julia, what you said confirms what my research had said, is that even the recreational operators should have to, by federal law, though they don't always do, get a federal, says, certification or petition. So that's your understanding, even the small...
Yes, they're required to petition for certification, and it's a fairly routine thing. If I could just step one step past that, the problem with that, aside from whether they do it or not, is that even if they have a petition, the correct paperwork to the FAA, that the FAA does not regulate privacy issues. And so the guidance that the FAA publishes is that they continue
and on this issue, but that's my problem with what we're doing here. Essentially, we're saying, if you're operating illegally, don't go near a house. And if you're operating legally, do whatever you want. And when we exempt those who have an FAA regulation, certificate or petition, they are legal under federal law. And everybody has to be under this, essentially. Then you're saying illegal operators have certain restrictions. I mean, it seems to me you could say, if you're illegal under federal law, you shouldn't be flying at all. And if you're legal under federal law, we want you to do certain things that are within our sphere, like privacy. I have a constituent, and I'm looking to how to write this, but they're in a neighbor war, but a neighbor that's trained a bunch of cameras on it. And then they raise their fence and they raise the pole that has the camera, and they're doing lights and things and so I would prefer the area that we do have authority over, that we have a constitutional provision protecting our privacy that says the legislature and I think by definition us have
jurisdictions.
Well, true, but right now as it's written, it is the illegal operators have slightly more restrictions on them and the legal have none. And I just don't think that makes any sense to me. So that's the concern, is that this federal requirement is much broader once I looked into it. And is so broad that by exempting it out, I'm not sure we're doing anything at all.
Any other comments from some members?
He's retiring. Hell.
But not shy. And not to restate what Eric said, but I think, the problem is that, like Julia's saying, that the FAA encourages privacy issues to be handled at local levels, because they're not doing that with the people, and everybody's supposed to be certified. So unless we're talking about scoff laws, the goal should be to try to create a privacy regulation that would apply to the people we're specifically exempting in this. And the danger in your approach, and I understand, with all humility, saying it's not perfect and all that, which certainly it's not. But
thanks.
It's sort of what you said at a couple meetings ago when we were dealing with the turning an armed police thing. One of the dangers is that we pass something that is not necessarily the good fix, but now we felt we've done something. We sort of delay and, if not preclude, the actual good fix that should happen. And that's my main concern with this, is I think we pass this thing, we've dealt with it, and in reality, it seems like we haven't dealt with anything. So I think you're on the right track. I just don't think this gets there. And I don't want your time limit or my time limit to be the driving force from getting a good regulation in place. That's all.
Mr. Steele, sir.
Yeah, my concern, this is spurring all kinds of thought process here.
Sorry about that.
I'm considering security cameras on the home just because of all the break-ins and things like that in the neighborhood. Well, what if my neighbor doesn't like it? I'm shooting by the fence line. What if, there's all kinds of privacy issues with whatever you do. And I can see us getting into all kinds of trouble, neighbor disputes, the raised poles.
Well, I can assure you this defines what UAVs are. So your security cameras are safe.
Well, they're only flying at about 10 or 12 feet off the ground. So
Yeah, that wouldn't apply. I understand your point, but that doesn't apply to that.
More work for Mr. Cross. He has nothing else.
Pardon me, Mr. Chairman?
Never mind.
See you next week.
We have so many neighbors fighting with each other. It's just amazing stuff. Doesn't matter what neighborhood you go to, we got neighbors in church wars. No.
Congratulations.
Chairman, this is Mr. Rada from the Parks Department here. I was wondering if you had any thoughts
John?
about how drones might
Go ahead,
be used
John.
to help his department.
There are practical